This week, it's the board games we're all playing as we're hunkered down during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the games that we used to play. Also, ditching in the spring. Big boy and little boy ditching. Plus, we're going to do a transportation segment in the second half of our show. It's the Rural Reflections Podcast. Welcome to the Rural Reflections Podcast. I'm Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio, and we've got Dave Nelson out there in Carrington, North Dakota. We're both holed up here, as everybody has been for the last couple of weeks, as we're trying to stay warm and, stay alive at least until the victuals run out. How's it going out there, Dave?
Oh, it's going all right. It took us a little while to get used to the minus temperatures, and actually, it seems like the colder it gets, the less wind you have, and so when it's been at 30 below in the mornings, it's been manageable. It's just a little shocking at first. It takes me about a week to get used to the sub-zero, where it doesn't feel like I'm going to freeze to death in my walk to the mailbox, which is about 30 steps.
I hear you. I always think that the house almost feels warmer once it gets real cold. When it's in that transition period, I always think it's kind of a little bit iffy. But once it gets really cold and the house really focuses on staying warm, it always feels better to me. I'm not sure if maybe that's just a function of what you were talking about as far as the wind calming down a little bit when it gets extremely cold. Because, of course, when it gets extremely cold, that barometer gets pretty high, and there's not a lot going on outside except extreme cold. And, of course, that cold means you need to have something to do inside the house. And one of the things we were talking about before we got on was board games. What have you got? You got a hot board game going on there today, Dave? I can hear some people in the background.
Yeah, we've been playing a newfangled version of Monopoly. Instead of having money, it has a credit card machine, and it's actually kind of fun, as long as you're winning. But it's, we used to play it as kids, and it seemed like the Monopoly game went on forever. But now, once all the properties are bought up on this one, the game is over, and then you got to start a new one. So I was just thinking about, some of the old board games we used to play as kids, and I remembered that Grandpa Zavro made Superman games, he called them, for everybody. It was basically a dice cup and moving and getting all your marbles to home,
Yep.
And he made them by hand, and they were just made with a drill and a piece of wood, but he made a lot of them, and like I said, he made all the little dimples by hand with a drill without drilling through too many boards. So I was just thinking about the board games, and I think a lot of people have been resorting to some of the old-fashioned stuff, putting puzzles together and playing board games and stuff like that. When it's been cold and when we've been enjoying this last year of pandemic craziness.
I think of those Superman boards, and as I recall, the face was painted one color, and the little dimples were painted another color. And I know that the puzzles have become a big thing also. I've never been very good at puzzles. Maybe like if they say for ages 3 to 8, that's kind of my wheelhouse, but those bigger ones, anything from 500 to 1,000 pieces on up, that's kind of the deep end of the pool for me. I've never been real good at those. But the board games, I remember when we were back in Viking back in the 70s and the 60s and the 80s, and for quite a long period of time, there was a lot of playing games, a lot of card games. We played checkers, we played chess, and I remember listening to 45 records in the afternoon and playing I can't remember. It's another card game, but we always had a little bit of music playing in the background. Olivia Newton-John, just different country music, a little bit of rock and roll. It was kind of a good memory, as I recall.
Yeah, it was, and that's something that we're missing a lot now, is just the time spent with people that you know and love, and just talking and playing games instead of playing on your phone or your computer or whatever, you know.
Yeah, we've built too many things to create isolation for ourselves. Now, this weather is going to go away eventually. Of course, the COVID's going to go away too. But when the weather leaves, typically we get into some ditching. Let's talk a little bit about that. First off, I want to talk about the good memory of ditching in the yard, creating your little canals. When there's a lot of water in the yard, we'd always ditch it a little bit to try and get the water out of there. And Dad started doing that, but then, of course, us kids, we'd go out there because it was actually kind of a fun little thing to do, to create your own little network of canals and holding ponds and that sort of thing. You remember doing that, Dave?
Oh man, yes. Do you remember the homemade paddle boats that we used to make?
Yep. With a rubber band.
The rubber band, and yeah.
Those are a lot of fun. Now, of course, farmers do a lot of ditching. It's so important, management of your soil and the groundwater and that sort of thing. It's a big deal as far as keeping that subsoil moisture either on your field or off your field, and ditching's a big part of that, and seems like we've gotten pretty high-tech with a lot of that. Of course, we got Steiger Manufacturing, who makes torque scrapers, and not more than 5 miles away from us, and the Hurricane ditchers, and there's a lot of other companies who do a lot of good things for moving soil to move the water, Dave.
Oh, man, yeah, there has been a lot. Actually, the scraper is becoming another must-have for a lot of the farms now. They're trying to, especially while it's dry now, clean some ditches, and there's lots of new ditching going on too, and cattail removal and all that, you know, to try and make sure that we don't have standing water in our fields, you know.
Has RTK moved into ditching just like it has in some of the other areas of agriculture?
Oh yeah. Most of the laser scrapers and that kind of stuff now are sitting somewhere in the corner of a shop or whatever, because they have the equipment already, you know, and RTK is available, and that's so. Yeah, there's a lot of guys are doing ditching with RTK now.
Let's take a quick break here. We did our coffee talk. Actually, a good run of coffee talk. I wanted to say one thing, just a shout out to Steve Dolan, who always gives me a text after our show, Dave. He's from the Jay Swanson Insurance Agency, and he always tells us how much he enjoys the program. So, Steve, I just wanted to say we really appreciate it. I mean, Dave and I, we're doing this because this is what we do, and this is our regular conversation, but it feels good to get an attaboy every once in a while. Now, coming up in the second half of the Rural Reflections podcast, it's planes, trains, and automobiles. Well, I don't know about the automobiles, but planes and trains for sure. Let's take a break, do the online call, and we'll be right back. I'm Grant Nelson. This is Rural Reflections. Projects seem to have entered my radar once again. Although I had still been taking on projects like building a deck and other construction, it was not until recently that I started with creative projects. This trend continues today. Now, 2 decades back, I'd make trips down to Red Lake Electric Cooperative to cut up broken utility poles for fence posts. The wood in these posts is solid and hard, so I decided to use some posts for boards. I cut off the treated ends, cleaned off any hardware and nails, and brought them to that sawmill guy in Red Lake Falls. Brought the boards home, stacked them, and said goodbye for 20 years. I recently made one of our rooms into a studio and office. I wanted to make the room a little more old feeling, as I'm often nostalgic. Anyway, I took these rough cut boards and attached them to the wall as sort of a border background in my room. I also built a little shelf under the border with a hidden light strip to display toy tractors. The boards were 1 inch thick and 6 inches wide and incredibly heavy, so they probably would be better used in a situation that called for incredible strength, but instead I used them for their incredible beauty. Lisa and I collaborated on the second project. We've long needed a light over the kitchen island. I've saved little things found around the farm over time, and one of these items would be a horse evener or a doubletree. Now, the cool thing about this piece is that, most likely, it was used either by Lloyd Noreen, Clifford Lindquist, or even my dad. All of them had horses and worked on this farm, although the period of time they each spent here covered 8 decades. I admire all these guys, so the piece meant a lot to me. Lisa suggested we use large string lights, such as you would see on a patio. I had to power wash off some of the patina as it kept flaking off onto the kitchen island. I used little J-hooks to hang the lights, ran the power over to the light, and hung the whole contraption. Now, we've been getting some help with some of our organization from Karen and Roger Ruby. We needed some organization in the entry and bathroom, but wanted some traditional design instead of strict utility. We mounted one barn door in our house some years ago, but one such door just didn't satisfy the need. Karen and Roger made 2 shelving units for us, both with a sliding door on one side to house supplies and an open side for display. The 2 pieces are created from a mixture of barn wood and painted wood, and they really helped us organize, well, keeping our little farmhouse nice and traditional. While America has spent the last year avoiding one another, so many of us have begun little projects in our homes. It's a satisfying and productive way to while away the hours until we can see each other again. I'm Grant Nelson. This is Rural Reflections. Welcome back to the Rural Reflections podcast. You've got Dave Nelson in Carrington, North Dakota, and myself, Grant Nelson, here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. This time around, we're going to focus a little bit on transportation. Now, Dave, it's National Family Truckers Week starting February 21st, so everybody's got about a week to prepare for it. It seems like truck drivers have gotten a little bit more of the notoriety they really deserve in the time of pandemic when we've depended on them so much and as essential workers. And it's an opportunity just to remember all the work they're out there doing. And I know you guys you're delivering tractors out there and combines, even though it's getting harder and harder as they're getting bigger. But you've got truck drivers there at High Plains Equipment too, don't you, Dave?
Yeah. So how do they observe this? Do the truck drivers just take the week off? Or?
No, they still have to work, but they do some things. I was listening to an interview with a trucking company out of southern Minnesota, and they just do some nice things, really, for the truck drivers and the family. They even give the kids a little chocolate semi. So, I mean, it's just more the recognition. So many of these people, when they get the recognition, it doesn't mean you get a day off. It just means it's a little bit different day of work.
Right. Yeah, I didn't really think they could ever stop working.
But we're talking about transportation this time around. And the one thing I wanted to start out with was lift aircraft. Now, of course, you and I both like the drone industry. We're interested in what goes on, or at least the payloads that drones really carry are kind of interesting because they have a lot to do with film. They have a lot to do with agriculture. A lot of the industries are starting to get into drones. The one payload is a very precious payload I've found out about. It's the Lift Aircraft Company. And what it is a very large drone with 18, count them, 18 rotors up above you. And the payload is a human being. And basically what you've got is a joystick that controls a computer, which controls the drone. It qualifies as an ultralight, so you don't even have to have a license, which is just about as scary as it gets to me. But they do have on-site training. But the plan for this is to basically put these units in areas, maybe urban areas close to cities, and then people can rent them out to fly into the city. And right now, they're only about a 15-minute duration, but still, as a recreational item, they're pretty fun, I would think, especially for the average person. Probably the same person who likes old tractors or motorcycles or something like that would probably like this. There's only one sticking point, Dave. They're $500,000, so that means you and I are going to have to put our money together to be able to do that.
Yeah, to afford a ticket for one ride?
I don't know if we could even do that. I'm about $500,000 shy as far as buying one of them. But if people want to take a look at them, they're at liftaircraft.com, and they're really interesting. I mean, and they're what you think they'd look like, really. I mean, if you can imagine 18 rotors in kind of a spider web with a little pod underneath, and then some actually amphibious landing gear. That's what it is, and it's basically a chair with a control that looks like a throttle. It's a joystick, and that's what you have. But, you know, as a fantasy flight, if you had enough money, if you could afford to do that, or you had to go somewhere where you could do it, it would be really fun. I mean, and this kind of goes into one of my fantasies is driving a train. And I've seen a couple places that will allow you to drive a train for an hour or so. One of them's in Illinois and one of them's in California. So for me, they could just as well be on the moon. But I don't know. Have you ever been on a train there, Dave?
I have. I haven't actually ridden on a passenger train, but I have been on them a little bit, just around the yard and stuff like that. And they're really cool. I really enjoy riding in the small trains that sometimes go through zoos and things like that. Actually, there's a couple of different train rides I'd really like to go on sometime. There are some dinner cruises and stuff like that. There's some real pretty parts of Iowa and up around Duluth. There's one that would be fun to go on.
I've even thought taking the Amtrak out west would be fun, but that's kind of outside my 25-mile perimeter. But I remember my one takeaway from the movie with Steve Martin and the Jerk was that they had that little train at the park, and I remember thinking to myself, that would be so awesome. Now, Kezar's out southeast of Thief River. Southwest, take it back. Southwest of Thief River, they used to have a little train setup out there that people would ride around, but that's been gone for many years. But I've always thought it'd be fun just to even have something made up to look like a train to go into a parade, but to go out and actually drive a train for a half hour or an hour, I think that would just be absolutely a blast. I mean, you're dealing with a lot of power there.
Yeah, it would be fun just to blow the horn.
Yeah. And there's something about diesel over electric. It's, torque on top of torque. I never have been interested in going fast, ever in my life. You catch me going more than 55 miles per hour, write it down on your calendar. But power, torque, that I'm interested in, and that's what trains have a lot of, Dave. I can't believe it, but we're already at the end of the show here, Dave. You got anything else for us? Are you going to be able to stay warm out there until we take a switch of about 50 degrees next weekend?
Sounds like by the next time we talk, it's going to be nice and warm again.
That sounds good to me. Hey, it's Dave Nelson out in Carrington, North Dakota. Dave, tell everybody hello if you see anybody out in the cold, would you please?
Will do.
And I'm Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio, and this is the Rural Reflections Podcast.